call the meeting to order, starting at 7 o'clock. Unfortunately, Dawn was not unable to be here as she had some medical issues. Thanks. That's not ready. I know. All right. This is my first time chairing a school committee meeting, so please be nice. Let's see. I think we have minutes to approve from.
Yes, we did.
It's not from the last meeting, though.
You want me to make a motion?
Hold on. Minutes from
April 11th.
April 11th, 2019.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of the April 11th, 2019 meeting.
Okay, second?
Second.
Discussion?
The only comment that I had was when we were talking about the, when Carol Gahan was doing a presentation about, let me see if I can remember this now, about actually having the Wilson program start, or being able to identify the students with dyslexia earlier down to the Green Meadow level. And that night I asked her if she could put together a budget of, and she was talking about over the next 5 years to push it down lower. And I had asked her if she could do a budget of like the next 3 to 5 years of what that would look like to transition down. So if we could just throw that in there, that would be great. That was the only comment.
Okay.
All right.
Switch these out.
Oh.
Okay.
So, all in favor?
All in favor?
Yes.
3-0 pass. All right. On to the next. Chairperson's report. Let's see. So these are just some notes that Dawn had told me to remind everybody about the town meeting on May 20th. Mary, she said that maybe you had a recap of the budget subcommittee meeting. I don't know if you want to do that now or members, during members' comments. It's up to you.
We can do it during members' comments
Okay,
if you
all
want.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
that'd be fine.
Also, she wanted to let everybody know that she spoke to the town administrator about the $50,000 for the Green Meadow Futures Committee building envelope work. And I think we're still trying to figure out where it's all going to happen, but she did talk to the town administrator about that. And then, Bethlyn, if you had an update on the Green Meadow summer camps. if you want to take it.
No. I sent an email, and I thought there was some discussion that had happened in another meeting that Dawn had been in. So understanding that she's expecting me to continue with that, I'm happy to. So I will certainly send an email as soon as I'm done and make a note right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to congratulate Natasha Rivera and Lydia Clancy for their win. Lydia was voted in last night to take over Justin's position early since he had stepped down. And unfortunately, she was not able to be sworn in today because the town clerk was sick, which is too bad.
And apparently no one else can do it. So.
That's actually not true.
No?
No.
Oh, well, we had an email from the town administrator who had checked with
The town attorney.
I checked with the state.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, we're sorry about that. We kind of, the town administrator, I'm sure everyone's trying to figure out how to move forward. So I'm glad you know that. Do you think you can let him know that? Because it would be good for him to know that too.
Yes.
Okay, great. So,
Okay.
and it would be good for us to know too.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Then I'm even more sorry.
yeah. Let's see. I think that's all of Dawn's chairperson's report. So let's move on to the superintendent report.
Thank you. Dr. Girardi is unable to be here tonight, so I am filling in. First, Dr. Girardi and I would like to thank Congresswoman Trahan for donating United States of America flags for the rooms in the wing of Green Meadow that needed renovation. The administration and staff of Green Meadow School organized a wonderful ceremony on the front lawn of Green Meadow. Congresswoman Trahan handed the kindergarten teachers and 2 students from each classroom a flag for the classroom. A special thank needs to go out to Katie Krasinski, who is with us tonight, for the ideas and efforts to make this happen. So thank you, Katie, and to the Green Meadow teachers and Congresswoman Trahan. Over the past month, Maynard Public Schools has been involved in a review of our programs to ensure that members of protected demographic categories are able to access and be successful in all of our programming, both academic and extracurricularly. This review has involved multiple steps, and I would like to thank our principals at Fowler and the high school for reviewing their extracurricular programs and providing participation lists. I would also like to thank all of the parents, teachers, students, and administrators who took the time to fill out our equity survey that we had sent out to the community, various community members. Finally, I would like to thank parents Jessica O'Toole, John Skogstrom, 5th grade teacher leader Maria Solar, literacy coach and 4th grade teacher Denise Hatch, high school teacher and Maynard Education Association President Mike Waldron, and Central Office Administrator Charles Gabron for attending. I would also like to thank our school committee representatives Bethlyn Houlihan and Mara Hogan for taking the time out last Saturday to participate in our first data equity walk. I have submitted a report of our progress and findings to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we'll share that document with the schools and Maynard community once we have final approval. It is my hope that this will become an annual part of our work to ensure that all students are able to be successful as part of the Maynard Public School community. Finally, I would like to recognize high school teachers and senior project facilitators Jean LaBelle Pierce and Paul Orzek. Today, they gave a dynamic presentation to districts seeking to create high-quality capstone experiences as part of the innovation pathways and early college pathways at the state level. For this program to be recognized by the highest leaders in the state as a model program is truly outstanding, and it's exciting for Maynard to be on the forefront of college and career readiness expectations. Ms. LaBelle and Mr. Orzak deserve a tremendous amount of thanks for helping to make the Maynard education truly exceptional. This is the 10th year of Senior Project, and we are incredibly grateful to both Ms. LaBelle and Mr. Orzak for their efforts in promoting and continuing this project for all students. I encourage all community members who wish to see the results of this work and be inspired by the amazing work that our students are doing to attend the annual Senior Project Showcase on Tuesday, May 21st. From 6:30 to 8:30 in the Maynard High School Gymnasium. And if you have not been, it is truly amazing to see the work that our students are doing with the facilitation and support of their teachers and staff. And that's my report.
Thank you. One thing I also forgot to mention is, Colleen, you ran those off. Thank you. Was the Green Meadow School Principal for Leadership and Operations Committee has put together a timeline, which there are printouts in the back, so that everybody has an idea of when things are going to happen over the next, looks like, month or so.
And if I could add to that, I was just talking to Charles a few minutes ago, and he said that the survey, some people have filled it out on what you would like to see in a new principal at Green Meadow, but it hasn't really, it would be great to have more people fill it out. So if anybody hasn't done it, if you could do that, it would be great. It will help us, definitely.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to Student Representatives Report. AJ and Pat.
Hello. So what is pretty much on everyone's mind at this point is prom. That's tomorrow. It's at the Burlington Marriott. Everyone's really excited. Our pictures are going to be starting at 4:30 at the Elks. The Mill and Main would not let us use their facilities to take pictures, so we were forced to move to the Elks, but we would probably move anyway because of the rain. And then on top of that, everyone is also worried about AP testing, which started on Monday and will continue until next Friday. So I know the AP US exam is tomorrow, so people in prom, or participating in prom and also taking the exam are going to be very, very swamped tomorrow. But
AJ, should you be home studying?
Well,
You're
that-
kind of,
I was actually going to say that. I just had my AP chemistry exam this morning, so
okay.
I'm a little scatterbrained right now, but I think it went well. Besides that, as you mentioned, on the 21st, that Tuesday night, there's the Senior Trifold Showcase. Obviously, I'm going to be participating in it. I'm really looking forward to it because I've helped a few students in my class with their senior projects, but I have not been able to really see anybody else's, so I'm kind of interested in that. And on top of that, this is really where the senior year is coming to a close because next Friday is the presentation night, or not night, but presentation day for all the seniors for their projects. All members of the town just coming from everywhere, coming to view the seniors. Next Friday, they're still looking for help, to my knowledge, so any extra hand, Jean LaBelle or Paul Orzik would appreciate it. But on top of that, I have since passed down my presidency for NHS to Pat's class, so that is pretty much a wrap for me and the other seniors. There's just one more mandatory requirement that we have to make, and then we are done for the year. And then the WAVM banquet weekend, I'm fairly certain we'll see each other before. No, we will not, because it is next weekend. It is happening on the 19th, and that's where, again, I'm going to be passing on the leadership to someone else. I'm fairly certain Pat's staying where he is right now.
yes,
So, but everyone's just really looking forward to the end of the year events right now.
Godspell,
Sorry,
which is,
Pat, I didn't mean to cut you off. It was just because his eyes were rolling that I thought that he was taking that test, so I didn't mean to stop you.
no.
It
Apologize.
just made me think of it.
On the 24th and 25th, Godspell, which is a musical, will be performed at Maynard High School under direction of, what's his last name? Mr. Lee.
I don't work with him.
Yeah, I forget his last name, actually. But yeah, it'll be a fun musical. It'll be actually very student-run, so we have, of course, I have the advisor and all the actors, and the pit will be student musicians as well. On the 21st, student government will be holding the overarching student council will hold their speeches on the 21st, and voting will take place for the 23rd. So that's the whole school student government, and then there's individual class governments for each class. They're trying to make it the same day, but they're not quite sure yet about class elections, but that's when student council elections will take place. And then speaking of, I guess, leadership positions, WAVM has released their management applications, and it's very exciting. I'm really excited. We have an expanded leadership positions, and it'll be really fun. So posters have gone up for that, and we'll expect some new positions, new people, new applications. It'll be good.
And I guess the only thing I'd like to add on top of that is seniors now 13 days left. So since then, next meeting, I talked with Ms. LaBelle, and I think we're looking at a new candidate for student representative. And it's looking like the person who has taken over for me as president of NHS, Talal Siddiqui, is most likely going to be taking over. We still have to just formalize it, but I will most likely be taking whoever's going to be reserving my spot for the following school year to the next meeting. And given that, that's probably going to be my last meeting as a student representative entirely, because that's the last meeting that I'll be in session for school.
Okay. That's sad for us.
Exciting for you.
Yes.
Do you mind just giving, for anyone in the room that might not, I'm sure people may have seen it in different places, but just mention again, so that if anyone, you were saying they still need people for the senior project,
So, yeah, I know
or anyone.
they do have a good amount of people, but I'm sure they'll always take others if needed. So if you just find the time that day, or if you just really want to see the senior project presentations, I do recommend it. Again, it's next Friday. That's about all, though. Just go up to the school. If you contact Jean LaBelle or Paul Orzik, you can see if there's any open spots. I know I said in great need, but I kind of exaggerated. They're in a somewhat need. But anyone who's available, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, so it's during the day,
12 to 2.
from 12 to 2, and you end up sitting in on student presentation, and so you see their whole project of 3 students usually,
Yes.
and get a chance to also give them feedback, and it's a really, really neat process to be a part of.
But more be totally impressed by
Yeah.
the work that has gone
Yeah.
into it the whole year.
Yeah.
AJ, can you explain a little bit more about, or maybe it was Pat that mentioned, about the student council and how that, why it's done now at the end of the year and not, or is this for next year?
Yep, so this is for next year. I'm not really sure of the exact reason, but it's just, I guess because they want to get off to a quick start, right in September, they want to
Okay.
get the ball rolling, fundraisers, stuff like that. So they do it the year before, the last couple months of the year before, just to get the leadership in and
Okay.
to get it structured.
So how does that work for the 8th graders going up?
So they will not be eligible for student council positions, but they'll have their own their class government elections. I'm not sure when they'll do that. I think they do that at the beginning of the year.
Okay, that's what I thought, because when my son's a freshman, and that's when they did it, but I didn't know that the rest
Yeah.
of the school did it the other
Right,
one,
yeah,
this
yeah.
way. Okay, great, thank you,
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. We have the school committee meeting dates for 2019 and 2020. I think we,
So in your packets, Ms. Colleen Moore was able to provide the updated and revised school committee meeting dates as requested from the last school committee meeting. So this should reflect the future meetings for the 2019-2020 school year. I don't think we need any sort of formal vote for acceptance. It's more just informational.
okay, great,
And these will be published online as well.
thank you. Then we have the Green Meadow Future Committee update.
Yes, go right there.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Jennifer.
Sorry, I make a mess.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Courtney Minconi takes great notes, so I'm just pulling up our meeting minutes, and I'm going to use those. Because unlike some other members, I can't remember a 3-hour meeting at the tip of my fingers. So in our meeting, we talked about a lot of things, but just to highlight, in the last school committee meeting, we talked about taking the recommendations that were at the end of the, entire inspection report. And so those are in a spreadsheet format, and I was able to meet with Dawn and Jen and Michelle and Tim to kind of go over those in detail. And so that was great. And we, some things are already done. So we updated status and talked about responsibilities. And so the plan is that would be a living document that we just keep using ongoing as we schedule, the items that we think should be done. So then, and I know that Michelle and Tim were at School Do training this week. So one of the things that came up was whether the teachers were going to be expected to, if they were going to be trained on School Dude, or if that's been decided yet, if they were going to be asked to enter tickets, or if there was going to be like a point person for the building that would be entering. So, and I was like, that when I've gone to software training, that's often the times that, you start to think about the different options and implementation.
We did talk about,
Okay.
do you want me to
Yeah.
give an update now, or do you want to finish? our-
No, that would be great. But I didn't mean to answer for you. Is that okay?
Okay. So at our meeting, when we met to review the tasks, the recommended tasks and so on, it was discussed that the spreadsheet would be transitioned into School Dude so that we can use this sort of as the pilot process. And so at this point, teachers would not be trained on how to use it individually, and they would still be making reports to the building principal and custodial staff in the same way. But then reports would be entered in, or items would be entered in, and in the future into next year, we'll be training our staff on how to do that work. We felt like adding, I believe Michelle and Tim, Ms. Resendez and Tim, blanking on his name, believe that it would be too cumbersome at this moment in time during the school year, and so to keep our consistent practices, but begin to have those things entered in there, which will allow us to do better tracking, which are things that we've talked about.
Yeah, great. So another topic that is related to School Dude, just while we're talking about that, is there was discussion about, we had some problems with some bugs in classrooms in Green Meadow, and some parents came to our meeting. We talked about notification, communication around that. So during the so we asked Josh, like, how do you handle like incidents, basically, like in a classroom, let's say, like any sort of incident related to the classroom that your child is in. And so he was saying that he actually uses School Dude for those type of incidents to like enter into kind of like document, okay, we had this incident in this room.
They're tracking it as
Yeah,
well.
right. And so then that gives you the ability to like look back and say, okay, like, what's going on, trends or frequencies or whatever.
But that's not, School Dude isn't then sending out an email to parents, like that's not.
I'm not sure about the ability to communicate that
Okay.
within the software, but that is where our conversation went. Like, how can we notify parents when there is some sort of incident that we deem, they should be notified about within like one classroom. So I don't expect us to solve that tonight, but that was just a topic of like, well, I really don't want to hear, I mean, we've talked about this before in general, but like, I don't want my kids to come home and tell me something that happened, that there were swarming, bugs around and they can't use a certain area. They want to hear that before the kids tell them. So working that, whether it's in the software or, a separate procedure in terms of when this type of incident is entered into School Dude, how then do we communicate to, how frequent, like just all of those details about procedure. That would be helpful, I think. So kind of like an incident report. And then on that, using those incident reports to then sit down monthly or quarterly with the building principal, with facilities, with whoever else needs to be pulled into those discussions to say, okay, these are all the incidents that we've had. They're all in the system. How are we dealing with them? And just so that everybody is on the same page, however frequently that needs to happen.
I wonder too if it
Yeah.
can be tracked there when they're communicating with parents, so they can see. I think it would be good to see both. So if they're seeing, to be able to make
Yeah.
sure that communication is happening, they're tracking, and that they can see the performance in that regard as well.
Right. Yeah, I think that if that's part of it, adding a step or having that be part of the review or So I'm not familiar with the software, so I don't really know what the options are, but
Either.
yeah.
Sort of
Just
seems
thinking
like
about
the
that.
old-fashioned way of a teacher doing a report in writing, giving it to a point person at the school. That point person immediately knows to get communication out to the parents, because that's the first piece, and then they can put it into school dude or something like that. It just
Right.
seems like old-fashioned writing would be the fastest response.
Right
but-
now.
So there are still, Deb Rizal has, and Terry Morrison, they've been meeting with teachers and keeping that line of communication open. There is still a concern, there's still a lot of concern about going back into the closed wing. And so Deb is, continuing to work with them on what exactly, just kind of distilling down, like what exactly are the specific, concerns, and then so that we can have a clear picture of how to address those. And Josh had an idea about, until we evaluate the roof, do we have someone come in to look above the ceiling tiles, on a monthly basis, or just some creative thinking about that. So Deb was still going to be working with teachers on trying to identify what that is. But we do have a little feedback box, so that Courtney Manconi got, so that's great. So that's in their break room, so they can put a little note in there, and that will be checked frequently and then brought to the committee. We talked a lot about humidity monitors. We're going to do some research about that in terms of, I think there's some anticipation in terms of the weather changing and getting back into that, hot, humid weather where we kind of started in September. So we're going to do some research about what does that look like? What are the options in terms of humidity monitors? And then we could, if there are certain areas that need to be targeted, we would have data that we could look at in the different classrooms to say, okay, why is this higher than the outside, or what have you? So just a way to kind of get in front of that. And so I think the two biggest things is just really the process to get the services to evaluate the building envelope, and I know that was discussed at the FinCom meeting.
And subsequently, you missed this word.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
I was like, I was number 7. I thought I was further down.
Thank everyone for being here.
John had spoken to the town administrator about the 50,000.
Great.
And I know that there's discussion on the town side about that. So.
Great. And then I think the other part about that, just so that you guys are aware, I think now that Aaron is leaving, that Greg is actually the only person with the certifications in order to execute that RFP. So, yeah.
Okay.
Another small constraint.
I thought I heard.
Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, maybe I'm not sure. I heard that Michelle is also, but
okay.
I'm not positive. So
Okay. Okay, great. And then I think the other big topic is just the schedule. It's just, it hit me a little bit more personally as I was in, after our meeting, but I was in the library and I was thinking, and I was volunteering in the library, and I was like, oh, wow, we have multiple moves and we have, all these dependent sort of tracks that need to be outlined. But I think that is already happening. Yeah, great.
I can give an update.
Okay, great. That would be great.
So we've met multiple times with building leadership and the facilities department. We have a draft plan that is being finalized by the facilities department to ensure not only will Green Meadow have the services that they need over the summer, but all of the rest of the district as well. My expectation is that we will have a final answer on that tomorrow so that we will be able to send that entire schedule out. Our current target date for opening the building, or for the building being sort of completely cleaned and ready for teachers to come in, is August, sorry, calendar's not working, August 12th, which would be the start of the second full week of August. So that is currently the target deadline, and we believe that not only will we be able to do the moves and all of the other components, but we are also bringing in a company to do a thorough deep cleaning of all of the spaces, and that will allow for hopefully some degree of comfort that in that capacity.
Great.
So just, I think one of the things, I appreciated that you'd sent an email just so that I understood a little bit, because I've been trying to see what we needed to move that forward. So will that include, one of the things I think that we were aware of was the layers of kind of, if this building, it sounded like there was at the beginning of all this, there was the kind of starting point was there's going to be more activity in the not this building, sorry, the Green Meadow building, then there.
No, it's the same amount of activity.
It's the same amount of, okay. So first off, so you're just still, but there's.
It's less because, sorry. So sorry to interrupt.
No.
So initially, it was the same schedule
Yeah.
with the extended school year programs, the Excel program and the Spanish immersion program within that building. We have moved a couple things over to Fowler. We are and that's part of, the multiple logistical meetings to make sure everyone has the spaces they need, and the facilities department will be able to do the cleaning of all of the buildings. But as of our last meeting, which was either the end of last week or the beginning of this week, we believe that we're going to be able to do all of the things and have that building open, ready for teachers by the 12th. So, but yes, there's no more, and in fact, again, there's fewer programs in that building than there have been in the past.
Yeah, very good. And so it's just the orchestration of moving whoever needs to be moved at different points to be able to do the different pieces of work, or, yeah, okay, great. I appreciate all of that work, because that's not a small logistical task.
Jen, we also, at the last meeting, we talked about maybe having an open house for parents, like before school started. Is there going to be time for that, or is it going to be really a time crunch? So that they can just come in and walk through and feel good about the space. You don't have to answer that right now. It would be great if we could do it, but if you can, but much more important that the building is pristine. And just, and it's something that I heard from a parent, I just wanted to throw it out there. There was some discussion about possibly the pods were going to be emptied before. What's the schedule for the pods to be emptied in that scenario?
So currently, our plan is that the furniture will be emptied out of the pods and put into 2 of the classroom spaces in the currently closed wing. That will allow us to decrease the cost of having those pods, because they're incredibly monthly rental fee is incredibly expensive. Michelle Resendez would be able to give you a better answer on what that cost is. So currently, the plan is to empty those out, put them into the last 2 classrooms that are there. We are working with the Green Meadow leadership on a plan to have teachers who were affected by the move review what furniture is personal furniture that they would, that is in those pods, and identify what sort of general furniture will be going back into those classroom spaces. So that will be done before the end of the year. And then what will happen is that they will keep the furniture in the last 2 classrooms, or the 2 classrooms that they have it in, do the cleaning, thorough cleaning, and painting and all of the other construction work that they need to do in that wing, and then redistribute the furniture in that capacity and clean those 2 rooms.
Excellent, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your process.
No, this is great. No, this is all related. So that's really all I have. It's, yeah. I mean, we had a long meeting, but I think in terms of an update, that's enough. If you have any questions for me, Thursday, yeah, So we,
Next Thursday.
yeah,
next Thursday.
we're sticking to the Thursday that is not, not the school committee.
So this coming Thursday?
Yeah, at 6:30 in the Green Meadow cafeteria.
I do have just one other question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Just hearing you talk about School Dude, and I think, I just want to make sure we close the loop, and maybe what I can do is just ask, Don has been involved in kind of bringing things back to the administration side, and you had that meeting with them to go over the recommendations,
Sure.
but it looks like, it sounds like one of the things to do and have written down is exactly what does the procedure look like? By when will things be entered in a School Dude? Who and how are they tracking, how the progress of those requests, all that kind of thing. We just need the procedures in place and written down and clarified and for everybody.
I think that would be great. I think that, not to speak for the teachers, but I think they would like to see that. I think that parents would like to see what that is, just in terms of knowing that there's a plan and that we understand how to, do things effectively moving forward. And then, and also there was some discussion about, which I'm sure that they're already, Michelle mentioned that they talk to other, neighboring districts, the people that work in their same role. So, and this software is used, throughout. So, just like that they had those conversations, that we're not reinventing the wheel, that, people, this is what, all these other districts do, and it works well for them, and just, so that would be great. We would love to see that, and I think the larger community would as well. So,
Okay, great, thank you.
thanks.
Do you get updates on work that has already been done?
In that meeting we did, Tim, let me know certain things that were already in process or that were already completed. So we do have the status. We didn't really talk about how we were going to do that moving forward. I mean, we can just use the spreadsheet. I can reach out to Tim and see what, and Michelle, what they would like to do.
I think we're going to use School Dude for that.
Okay.
That's my understanding from that meeting.
Okay. And so whether we can get a report out of School Dude, I don't know. Yeah, so I can reach out to them and just ask for, maybe before our meeting, can we have a report out of School Dude of all the, tickets that are related to our recommendations? Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
I'm just wondering whether or not that it would be helpful for us to know that also. So, because I'm just wondering, okay. I'm just wondering, like, specific things that I remember from the report that
Yeah.
I was horrified about. I would like to know whether or not those things have gotten done.
Yeah.
So, okay, great.
And,
Yeah, I mean, I can ask them for the report, and then when we get it, then I can share it with you if you'd like. I mean, the committee.
Well, if it's electric, then they could
Yeah.
just send it to
Sent
all
to all of us. Great.
Right.
Yeah. I can
So,
ask for that
and
too.
I know this is a long time down the road, but I know that one of the places that we fell down, and that everybody always falls down, is that you put all these pieces in place for the current staff, so they know everything, and then new people come in, and then it gets lost in transit, and that's, I mean, even things like putting things in front of the events, and, just things like that you wouldn't maybe think of as, teacher, or any of us, but definitely have an impact. So if we could just I'm big about putting together just information at entry level. This is, information so that, again, we try and have this not happen
Right.
again.
You wanna-
So,
you wanna
yeah,
speak to
so
that,
one
Jen?
of the things that Ms. Resendez and myself have been speaking about with Dr. Girardi, as well as the need to create an employee procedure manual involving numerous items that are inconsistently taken care of, not just with facilities. So that's part of what we're going to be doing, Ms. Resendez and myself, over the summer. Additionally, in speaking with Chair Capello, we have been working on a sort of checklist, if you will, that will go on the back of all of the classroom, or on the inside of all of the classroom doors with sort of these are the expectations of what can be on the walls, what can be here, what can't be, what to check, prior to the beginning of the year, the end of the year, and all of those pieces. So again, it's creating those protocols and procedures that I think many districts, particularly districts this size, have struggled with because there's a feeling that, well, we know what to do, and so we can just keep doing it with our internal staff. And yet when things turn over, and I found this myself coming into the district and asking, well, what is the practice? And you get 12 answers. So we're really looking to centralize that so that there is clear expectations, and then we can make sure that people are meeting those expectations or help to do so if they're not.
Fantastic, thank you. And one thing, and Pam Curtin actually just made me think of it, because you weren't here when we were talking about the Excel program and that for the summer. Is communication, I guess my question is, when is communication going out to the parents to tell them what's going on with that?
So-
Maybe it already did, I'm just not in the newsletter.
I don't believe it did, but it could have.
Okay,
I get
all
the
right.
Excel stuff,
I
but
just want to make sure that
I have no idea.
parents are aware that,
Yes, so Ms. Cohen was a participant in that meeting where we finalized these plans. As I said, we are waiting on final approval from the facilities department just to make sure that, because one of the things we're doing, for example, is moving Excel from Green Meadow at the end of the extended, or at the end of College Gate here, over to Fowler, so that we have more space in Green Meadow that we can clean and so on. But we just needed to review and make sure with the facilities department that meant we'd be able to do all of the cleaning in Fowler that we needed to do there as well. We met with two of the custodial staff, and we had, it was this week, because Michelle and Tim weren't there, so it was this week. But we did have them via text message communicating with the components, but of course they were at the training, so we just want a solid set of eyes to make sure that what we had planned is going to work.
perfect, so we'll get the word out as soon as it's final.
Yes, and again, I expect tomorrow, but they are still away, that we'll be able to know yes or no if this will work, and if it does, then it'll be an easy piece to send out, and I'm sure Ms. Cohen will be communicating about her programming as well.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
I don't.
No. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As
Thank
usual.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is the cafe services contract approval.
Yes. My notes have moved things around, hold on. So this is a the three-year food service contract needs to be approved annually. We have been very pleased with the Fresh Picks service and the quality of the meals and so on. They've been very responsive to feedback that we've given them throughout the year, and we would ask that the school committee vote to approve the annual renewal for the food service contract at this time. So if you want
I
to
don't know
entertain a
what I'm
motion?
supposed. Oh, sure, yeah. Motion for renewal of the contract? Do I have a motion?
Oh, I'll second it. You just
Okay.
made the motion.
I just made the motion, okay, thank you.
It is
Discussion?
unnerving being the chair when you haven't been before, I
Yes.
understand. I guess I would just ask, being on the wellness committee, you
I
would
was just-
hear any feedback?
I was just going to say, she is, and I cannot think of her name at this
Heather
moment. Thank you. I
Chastity.
was going to say Heather,
Yep.
and then I wasn't sure. She's been amazing. She has been to every wellness committee meeting, which is 7 o'clock in the morning, by the way, but, has not only been helpful as far as listening to, feedback that we had, especially at the beginning of the year. Change is always difficult, but even some of the other recommendations that she's made outside of her job description have been amazing, so I've been really
Yeah.
pleased.
Great. So you want to call for a vote?
All right. A call for a vote?
Absolutely.
All in favor?
All in
All in
favor.
favor?
Yep.
3-0.
On to citizens' comments.
Hi, Lydia Clancy. I have a child in Fowler. So in regards to what happened last night, it was supposed to be a joint meeting of the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, meaning that there needed to be a quorum. And because I believe you were told that it wasn't necessary for you to be there. There was no quorum. Therefore, there was no joint meeting. And the vote ended up being 5-0, with the Board of Selectmen appointing me, but absolutely no school committee representation. So that was the first issue.
Dawn was there, wasn't she?
Yeah, but there's no quorum. It couldn't.
Right, oh, sorry.
So
Oh, she
she,
couldn't vote because...
so she couldn't vote because there wasn't a quorum, so there was no school committee.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Secondly, the town moderator is given the power by the state, and it is part of his responsibility to cover for the town clerk in the event when someone needs to be sworn in. I spoke with the state, William Galvin's office. I spoke with the executive director of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and I spoke with Dick Downey himself. Dick is completely unaware of this aspect of his job. So that's an issue right there, because he could have sworn me in today. So that being said, I would respectfully request that I be invited to join the executive session tonight, because that also is within your power and within my right.
I don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, yeah, I don't know if we're breaking the law.
Yeah.
Because we don't have anybody here. Legal.
I don't, my understanding is that it's sitting school committee members, but that is not based on any sort of legal opinion that I have sought out. So I don't know, I can't give you any sort of advice or guidance.
I don't know. So I wish you had brought this to us before, Lydia, so we could have had counsel.
Yeah, it's just,
I
I
have
really don't feel
no-
comfortable without having
The
counsel.
sworn, well, and the sworn in part.
Right, that's what I'm saying, to
Right,
say
yeah.
if it's okay.
You have the
yeah.
authority to invite anyone to a meeting. It doesn't have to be a sworn committee member. You could invite any old person off the street.
Executive session?
well,
Yes.
it's different, but within it, because the executive session with, yeah, I just don't even know how to kind of consider it, because if we end up in some legal territory that we don't know, that's an issue.
Okay, so then I'd like to point out again that there is a lack of knowledge in terms of what your authority is in terms of this, because I spoke with two different state people today who said that absolutely, and including Becky in the town hall, said that you guys have the authority to invite
Yeah,
me in.
and so what would be helpful is if we know that ahead of time, then we can also then find that out. Because that's exactly what we have to do, is we have to make sure that we do our
Okay.
due diligence and find things out along the way, but on the spot, we just don't necessarily know.
How was I to know you didn't know?
Yeah, I don't know how you would know. I wouldn't know unless we were able to communicate around it.
Okay.
It's never, well,
I
yeah,
apologize.
with
Lydia.
12 years of experience, I've never had that question brought up, sorry, but it just hasn't, so.
Okay, is there a way to
apologize.
postpone?
That's what I was just going to say, do the things that we have on executive session.
It's
do
a
we have
good
to vote
question.
on tonight?
Um,
Time sensitive?
There are a couple that are time sensitive, yes. But it is your meeting and your call in that capacity.
Another choice would be to have another meeting next week, just for executive
That's
session, I
true.
suppose,
We
next
could do
Thursday.
that. I won't be able to be there, but
Dawn will, and yeah, so we could do that, would that be okay?
Mhm.
Are you?
I'm okay.
It might need to be earlier than next Thursday, just with the timing
Yeah,
of one of the issues,
yeah.
but I can look at that date and get that to you,
Okay.
if it does need to be earlier
We
than next
just need
Thursday.
that 48-hour to.
Yep, I will
post it.
look tonight before I leave, so.
All right, so
that
we'll
we
let you know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no worries.
Thank you.
thank you, Lydia.
Hi, Natasha Rivera.
Congratulations to you two, you weren't here when
Yeah.
Mara
No,
said
thank you,
congratulations
thank
to
you.
both of you.
Yeah, Route 2 traffic was fabulous. So at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, part of the members' comments, Justine mentioned being part of the budget subcommittee meeting that she had recently attended, that the 50K that was referenced, the school said that they would be absorbing that through the school's budget, not through the town. That the discussion was that the school would have that. So I just wanted to, I know it was brought up with Megan, it was talked about, but that was the understanding Justine presented during her reporting out.
So you're saying that she reported that her understanding was that
The school
schools-
offered that they agreed that they would find a way to absorb the 50,000
Okay.
because through their budget.
So I was going to talk about it at the members' comments, but, and I wish I'd brought my notes.
Which was kind of confused, that's only, I bring it up because it sounded a little different than.
Yeah, it
what
was, it's a 600, so it was free cash, and we went
Right.
through all the numbers up to get to the 2 million. And 610 was the number that was allocated for remedial work at Green Meadow. There's, again, we don't want to spend the money before we definitely get it, but when we talked about the 60,000 coming from, hopefully, Kate Hogan.
Not the library, the 50,000 for the Green
No, I
Meadow-
know, I'm
Oh, okay.
getting to where the
Yeah,
50,000
okay.
would come from,
Yeah.
because then they were saying, the other people at the Budget Subcommittee were saying, well, maybe we should take that 610 number down by 60,000. And I said, we can't do that, because it's not guaranteed that
It's
we're going
not
to get
known.
it. So then there was conversation about hoping that we get the 610, that then the 50,000 will come out of that to sort of use the level service money, I mean, the level library money, but not really, but it sort of comes out of that. So it's out of that 610 number.
Okay.
So I guess you could call that out of the school budget, but not really, it's out of the free cash.
It was not framed that way.
Yeah.
It was framed in that.
I mean,
the
we went
school-
around and around and around
Yeah.
about it, but.
So clearly there was different takeaways. So I just wanted to say that there, and what Justine, I had talked to her afterwards because I wanted to get clarification, and she did say that the town, and Greg was there with her when they were speaking, was that they don't want, just because you're asking for 610, that whatever's left over is not used, actually they want returned back to the town.
Yeah.
So that the 50,000, as it was mentioned, they would hope that that is what the school would do, is absorb that, because they don't want to use it all. So anyway, again,
Okay.
different takeaways, but just a point of
And we
clarity
did
there.
go round and round and round about it, so, yeah.
Okay.
Understandable that people might have taken away different things.
Yeah,
But one
Yeah.
way or another, that 50,000
It will, yeah.
was, essential, so.
all agreed that in order to be long-term planning, it needs to happen to know what's coming next, and that's why I think everyone was in agreement there. The other part that was brought up was, which was discussed part of the agenda, was Aaron leaving. And then afterwards, a couple of members, through their member comments, had their own personal take on the situation, and the chair specifically felt very frustrated that they've had several conversations with the school, I think possibly the superintendent specifically, about access to how he was being accessed and maybe being pulled in a lot of directions and not going through the town administrator's office, as they say they have requested. Again, I'm not part of any of these conversations, but there clearly has been some type of org frustration on who's being called and how frequently, and if going through the chain of preferred command was there. So I would say at some point, maybe reaching out to, they were also going to reassess that role, because I don't know if it's really
Not working.
successful for anybody to fill it in a way that it's outlined, and we've had a lot of turnover through the years for that role, and so that was a topic that actually a couple of, Justine and Armand brought up, that maybe that with Greg, they would look at the job description to see if that's really a functional piece that anyone could really succeed in.
Right, I know Don and Aaron, before he was leaving, before he even mentioned that he was leaving, and I think Tim, they might have sat down and were trying to figure out if there is a different model, that rather than having the facilities director in charge of all 15 buildings, which is just doesn't work.
Well, I think it's important to note, too, that those were the DPW director and facilities director were two separate positions.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they appointed Aaron as DPW director, they continued to have that facilities director on top of that, and didn't fill that second position
Is that what it is?
at the town level.
Okay.
So
All right.
currently, it's a joint position, which may be part of the untenable nature of that, but initially, it was never designed to be that way. So as these pieces, and I do know that the town, because we are in custodial contract negotiations, we are working with the town attorneys and the town manager to write up an agreement of how this
MOU?
joint facility piece would function. And I believe that should be ready for town meeting, I think, because I believe we have to vote on some aspect of that at town meeting, is my understanding, but that is not,
Yeah, they
I'm
didn't
not
speak to
involved
the
in all of the
MOU.
conversations
Yeah.
related to
No,
it.
I agree. I think it was, it's been mentioned, but I haven't heard any myself, and
Yep,
where
they are
everyone's
continuing
landed.
to meet as part of that process.
Okay. The other piece, which I know Megan touched on, about I was at the Green Meadow Future Committee meeting last week, and it was strongly expressed by teachers present about their fear of, or not going or returning back to the K-wing. So I just wanted to echo specifically that piece, because it was a long part of the discussion. And I think part of it was reassurances, how they can feel reassured that if their concerns are expressed, or if there's maybe periodic inspections that can be done jointly with the principal, maybe crafting some type of job aid the principal can do in connection with like a town, Tim, building, high level, check it off, have a binder so that, on reference, it can be seen that it's being done, that kind of trust that can be built. I think the message of everything goes okay probably can't come from the current superintendent. I don't think that there's a level of trust that will resonate in the way that we would want with the staff. But I had written down a quote, and I'm trying to find it because it was just very kind of sad to hear. But a quote was, "They don't want to be the canary that drops." So essentially, being put in there without having some understanding of some independent inspector who's been looking through and monitoring, especially that since the roof really is not possibly going to have repairs done at that point. So just wanted to echo those concerns because they were really heavily discussed last week, and just whatever consideration can be made with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin Stone. I have a son in the Green Meadow School. So, hi, Mary. I was at the budget subcommittee with you. I also believe of the school committee, Don Capello was also on the phone there. I believe I recall discussing this $50,000 for the envelope survey. I recall the discussion coming to, we want to be sure to go to town meeting and show that we're being financially prudent. So we were going to look at every possible source of funding for this envelope survey. I recall the consensus being that we were going to pull the funds, the total $50,000, from multiple sources. I recall one of those sources being there was some leftover funding for the roof repair.
36,000, that's right.
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, just trying to jog your memory.
Right, thank you.
But I would suggest that we put that in writing and we update the warrant on the town website to reflect these changes, so we just avoid any confusion. Because it sounds like there's something different was said at the at the joint meeting last night. I unfortunately wasn't.
There were so many different conversations that were going around for it.
Yeah, and I understand that things are fluid, but I left that meeting with the understanding that there was one plan, and now I'm hearing another, and I'm just wondering what's going on. But if you say Don was negotiating and trying to find alternative sources of funding, I'd like to know what the plan is and be able to comment on the plan.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
I just wanted to jog your memory and help you out and let you know where I'm coming from.
Thank you for
All right.
coming to that meeting, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. It was, it was a pleasure being there, and thank you for being so welcoming and giving me a seat at the table. All right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
Last night at the Board of Selectmen, they brought forward the unemployment insurance for the cafeteria workers for a transfer. They denied it, the Board of Selectmen. They said that's your responsibility to pay out of your budget, not theirs to pay out of free cash, just to give you a heads up there. And second, I don't know if everyone knows that the warrant articles are already out. They came out in the action. So they're not being mailed to your house, they go in the action, just so everyone knows.
I received a copy.
Thank you, Brian.
I received a copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the-
You should have received a hard copy
Right.
in your mail.
It comes in the action.
Yeah, it was an
But it was
inserted, yes.
They did it in the action this year.
Right.
Yeah,
We're supposed to send out a thing.
but it's very confusing, right? Because,
independent.
yeah, because I'm like, oh, the action's
Oh, I
really
see what
thick
you're
this
saying.
week.
Oh, okay.
And then when I went through, you realized it was in there.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't write, mine must have fallen out, so I just figured it came in the mail. Okay,
Yeah, it's inside instead of the element.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Hillary Griffiths. I just had a question. I know you have the schedule for hiring the new principal at Green Meadow. Has there been any, I've heard a lot, I hear a lot of people in the community talking about how they don't think that we should have 2 principals in every school. And I've heard people ask if there's data to show why we want to. And I've heard data exists, but no one's ever seen any actual data. Are you guys looking at whether or not you actually want 2 principals? Like, are you reassessing the model itself, or just saying this is what we're doing from now on and like just trying to replace the one that's leaving?
I can answer that. We are continuing to assess the principal model. We will be giving a presentation on June 6th, at which point we will be able to provide not only, because we do have teacher feedback surveys from this year, but we wanted to wait until the end of the year so that we could use the school council parent surveys, which we did at the end of last year in all 3 buildings, to evaluate whether we see an improvement in some of those cultural components that is assessed through that survey. So those surveys should be going out this month, and we will be evaluating it and giving a presentation on June 6th. I can tell you that we met as a leadership team to discuss the different models and the benefits and challenges associated, which will also be a part of the presentation. To my knowledge, I don't know that there is any community conversation about reducing to 1 administrator in the building. I think the conversation is about what those roles are. And so what we are looking at is whether or not the model or the idea of having people who are responsible for different elements of the building is an effective piece. We do have data to indicate that there are effective components of that again, through teacher perceptions, but we wanted to wait and provide the parent opportunity for feedback for the spring surveys. We did discuss whether or not we sent out the surveys in the middle of the year, but felt in terms of making sure that the data was comparable from 1 year, or sending out a different survey, but to make sure the data was comparable from 1 year to the next, that was the decision to wait on that piece of it.
So when are you hoping to choose a new principal by? I thought that was about a month from now.
Yep.
So are you going to replace that position before really assessing whether the position is needed?
So again, I think the community conversation is really what are the roles of the people within the building. I don't believe that there's a desire to reduce the number of administrators within each building. If that is something that the community would like us to explore again, we are certainly able to do so. So if that is the case, we will need to replace that person, that personnel. And if we determine that the principal model in terms of having the separated duties is not working, it would just be a matter of sort of a change in the title components.
So I think my understanding is that the community does have concerns about the dual principal model and would like it to be assessed. And I think there's frustration that instead of assessing it, we're just going forward with it. And I think this is a good opportunity. Like, I don't think it'd be fair to fire half the administrators because you want to try something new. But it seems like, why would we commit again? I assume when you hire someone, you can't hire them for like the summer until you reassess. Like, they want real contracts that last a while. So I guess, I'm wondering why we're not assessing the model as a whole.
I'm sorry if I misspoke or wasn't clear. We are assessing the model as a whole. The question is, what are the job duties of each person within the building? Not whether, as I understand it, the community concerns that have been floated up and people have mentioned on Facebook and so on are about whether or not it makes sense to have a principal of leadership and operations and a principal of curriculum instruction and assessment, or a principal and an assistant principal. That, to me, is the sort of different piece of it. So we will need to have a person who is able to do all of the things that we are currently in the leadership and operation job description anyway. Currently in the hiring cycle, we are seeing a lot of principal and assistant principal positions coming up. So to wait further would mean that we would have a smaller pool. But if, again, and we will have this answer, I believe, at the June 6th meeting, because we are in process of looking at all of the data, that would be the final presentation of it. If we determine that a principal and assistant principal model is going to give us more return on our investment, it would be a matter of changing job descriptions and saying, you know, you're doing if you're the principal, you're doing both the evaluation and the building management and maintenance in that capacity.
I don't know a lot about the field, but in general, if someone's applying for a principal job, are they happy to have that position change into a vice principal job? Or do people who apply for principal want to be a principal?
I think what you're saying is that it's not defined before we're interviewing candidates, right?
Yeah, like if you post for a principal, you get applicants for a principal, you hire someone as a principal, a couple weeks later, I don't think, are you allowed to just say, well, actually, we decided you're going to be a vice principal now?
I think you're making assumptions about what position would be changed into what. And there's other components of things that are happening.
Okay.
So that will be announced in short order.
Okay.
I do want to say that it's something that we need to make sure is happening, and part of why we wanted to make sure that June 6th, and we appreciate having that data by then, and seeing, is this giving us the data that we need? Are there other metrics that we need to make sure that this is the model we want to go with? We, as a school committee, had seen and heard from the beginning in the process of why this was a good potential for a pilot, and for that's worked in charter schools. I mean, you don't see it as much in public schools. So I agree completely that you need to have the metrics there, and we want to see what there is and see if it's enough to let us know what we're getting and what we need for our community.
Hi, Kevin Stone again. 2 comments regarding the 2-principal model. First, it would be very helpful if you can quantify what the financial differences are between the 2-principal model and the principal and assistant principal model. Really would be nice to know if we're arguing about something that's financially significant or if it's just a tempest in a teacup. Second point is I actually have some serious doubts about the validity of your data. Specifically, it really sounds like you're mistaking correlation for causation here. You don't have enough principles in your data set to really average out the effect of personality, management style, from being able to assess, versus the difference between 2 principals and a principal versus assistant principal. If you could draw on a national data set or a statewide data set, that would have a lot more validity, but I just think your sample size is too small to be able to distinguish confounding factors like management style and personality. And even Lydia said that at the Meet the Candidates meeting. So I agree with that.
Yeah, you have the same problem trying to assess whether or not assistant versus, like in our district being small, and it's going to be hard to assess that in general. I'm finding that with education. I come from the world of research where we look at significance and all the time and try to look at the 0.05 and 0.01. So for me, coming here, you're relying on a different system of evaluation than you do in the straight up basic research and social and even in behavioral research worlds.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to make a data-driven decision, I agree with you. You can't distinguish, you can't really distinguish between the two principal model and the principal vice principal model. You just don't have enough data to make the distinction whether there's any value gained. It's just, you're just seeing noise. Or what you're seeing is confounding effects like the effect of management style much more than whether the two principal model is superior than the principal vice principal model. You're just not able to separate out that signal from the noise of management style and personality.
Well, I think it'll be good to see what we have and go from there, because I think that you also start from the theory is really important, and the consideration of where did this come from and why would you consider these models? And there's that becomes, if that's cohesive, then it makes sense and it resonates as part of the metrics as well, and you see that things are making sense in your particular district too, then it could be that that's compelling. You're not going to get what you're saying, and that's why it's also good to see the financial impact so that you can weigh. Does this make sense? Is this enough value for us? How are we doing? And then you just have to decide as a community to move forward.
Well, on the financial model, I'm even wondering if it's worth debating. I mean, if we're talking like $10,000, then
Less.
difference, less, then it's, you know, I'd have to see the financials, but I'm guardedly would say like it's maybe not worth debating, quibbling over $6,000. But again, you're going to have to show that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to show that to me.
And that'll be part of the metrics. The other component, again, part of why we're waiting until June is so that we can have parent feedback. By no means are we presenting this as a research study that we will seek to get published in any sort of paper that this is what all schools should change to. That's not what we're looking at here. But I do, anecdotal data is information that we can use to make a decision about what we want to do as a community. The other metrics that we are going to be providing information on is the ability within that model to address the concerns both for building culture and for academic rigor related to evaluation models and those types of pieces. So we'll be showing some of that data as well, because part of this was to create efficiencies within the system to allow our staff, our administrative staff, to do the things that they need to do to both evaluate teachers and move forward in academic rigor, but also deal with building culture issues related to students and student culture. So
Yeah, I just don't think that's going to be persuasive to someone who's got a background in statistics. It would be helpful.
Absolutely not. It is not going to be persuasive to someone with a background in statistics. That is true.
It would be helpful if you could broaden your data set. I mean, I'm certainly open to the idea, but you got to have a broader data set.
I can tell you that as we are looking out in this, I am having people, colleagues from various districts across the Commonwealth who are reaching out and asking for information on how we put it together, why we put it together, what the structure is, because they are identifying part of the purpose of this, that they're seeing the same challenges that we were seeing in regards to having one person who needed to have two very different skill sets, expertise in two very different skill sets. That is, again, not a data set that you're looking at, but it is something that is indicative to me that people are trying to explore how we do things a little bit differently and more efficiently.
All right. Thank you for entertaining this discussion.
Thank you.
And I'm going to say the unpopular thing, what else is new? We've only been doing this for 2 years. I think to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
And really only this year.
Right, like even a year and a half. So to have a real pilot, for any pilot to even find out how it's going, you really need to at least give it 3 years. So I really wish people would have some faith in us and just let it play out. I think you're going to hear some really good information on June 6th with the, with the presentations from the different schools and that. But I just wish we could just give things a little longevity before we start throwing it out. So I'm just saying it.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about the funding, just because it came up, and I know Josh was at the budget subcommittee meeting, and he, so the other piece, just so everybody is aware, is whether or not the money can be spent by June 30th, right? So that's the other piece, and that's why I understand that Dawn is going to be talking to Greg about the options, right? So we have to.
Because there are certain pots of money that would not need to be spent by June 30th.
Right.
And there are others that would be limited by that.
Certainly
Right,
we
so
cannot
there's-
spend, but that 36,000 that we were talking about can be spent.
Past
right.
6:30, that's my understanding, right? So then it would just be the supplement past the 36,000, the 14 would that's the additional amount. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I had a couple of follow-up questions about the two-principal model. The survey that you referenced, Jen, is that survey data that you're expecting for this year's parent survey that you're collecting?
So I have a message out to my leadership team, to our leadership team, that they should send the same survey that was done last year through the parent councils to be able to collect data that we can follow from one year to the next.
So we, because I talked to Mary Beth last week, actually, but it may have been, I don't know when you spoke with her, because the survey, we're going to be talking about it at our upcoming meeting at Green Meadow on Tuesday. The expectation that we had previously discussed was that we would use that as a historical basis, but tweak depending on whatever questions that the council wanted to add. And we'll also be using the Google form as the preferred way to deliver that. But there, even if you take the baseline survey that we used last year, there's no questions that asks about the survey, the principal model.
Correct.
So I don't know how you would gather parent satisfaction of the principal model if there was no survey question that directly asked that.
Sure. So what we were looking at, and I don't have the surveys in front of me, but they did indicate, satisfaction related to communication, satisfaction related to a variety of other issues. And so, again, part of the purpose of the delineation of responsibilities was to increase our effectiveness in certain areas that families were seeing as being particularly deficient. So we were going to take the questions that related to those areas, to those job components, and see if we saw a difference between last year and this year in parent satisfaction related to those specific pieces.
Part of one of our discussion pieces this coming Tuesday will be to kind of tweak it a little bit. And we had talked about questions about the new specials, because that's new this year. I think what we will probably likely do is add a question in some collective framework that asks more targeted about feedback on their experience with the two-principal model. I think that probably would be a little bit more sensible to accurately get appreciation or understanding from parents about how that would work. So I think the council will discuss that as a possibility.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I think that's, if you're looking for that, I think that might be a better way to just kind of frame it in a way that the council is in agreement on to get a better Green Meadow targeted understanding on how that has worked.
So we considered sending out, as I said, the parent survey related to that in the winter when we were evaluating or continuing the evaluation process. And the concern was that the question, because this has become a political football, the question of do you prefer or not prefer the two-principal model, or what is your satisfaction, would not necessarily result in sort of the job performance of those pieces. So just as you're writing that question, something to keep in mind about how to get,
framing it in a way that's constructive. Absolutely. I don't want it to be intended in a way that,
Absolutely. We want data that's usable.
Yeah, we want data that's usable, satisfaction overall. But
I might also suggest having it be, do you feel like you don't have a full understanding of what it is? Because I think, I find when we're developing surveys for the work that we do, part of it is validity of the question. So if you can say that you are satisfied or not, but you may not really know what it is you're getting. And we talk about things like shared plans of care, and do you really know what that is in the medical realm for your child, and care coordination, and your understanding of what that, so these concepts that you may or may not understand, so that might just be a good thing to include. I appreciate that you guys are considering this all so.
Well, I think it's helpful. I mean, it comes out annually to, if we're looking at overall satisfaction or understanding, that's a good way to measure, actually, is asking, do they understand, and then based on that, articulating the satisfaction of what they perceive, their personal satisfaction or experiences with them and their child through that. I did have a question also about.
I was going to say, to get really good data versus, like you say, the political football, would it be helpful to kind of ask Jen for a couple of questions, really?
So what I can do is share.
Just want it to be good information, good or bad.
So what we did with the staff, we actually worked with the Teachers Association last year to create this survey, and essentially it says, this job is designed to do this and list specific things, and have you noticed a difference? So I can share those questions with you.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
If you're able to send that to me before Tuesday, because then we can have a good discussion as we're putting it together, because I would like us to be able to send it out
Yep.
sooner rather than later.
Yes.
The June 6th presentation that you mentioned that you're going to be doing, is it the data that is it broken down to the different schools? Or is it overall? Because I think the different schools would be helpful, because
Yes,
it's been.
I agree. So we will have data from parents from the different buildings, and working with the Teachers Association last year and developing the survey, there was maybe it was 2 years ago at this point, I'm not sure. But in working with them and developing the survey, there was a desire to not disaggregate and not ask that question, so we continue to not do that. That is data I would prefer to have, and I'm hopeful that as we continue to rebuild trust in relationships, that we will be able to ask that question so that we can disaggregate that data and have the differences between the buildings, because it functions differently.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that got brought up was that the success of the two principal model is that being confused with the success of a dynamic of two individuals versus the success of the model itself. And I think that's hard to differentiate if you're lumping everything together,
I agree.
because it's kind of like apples, oranges a little bit. So that's where, I mean, I appreciate whatever it is that you'll be presenting. I look forward to seeing that. I just am wondering if it's going to answer some of those questions or make more questions that are not, understood. And I just, in preparation for it, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alex Waldron. I have 2 kids at Green Meadow and 1 at Fowler. I just have a few questions and comments about some of the things that we've been discussing tonight about the dual principal model. How many districts in Massachusetts have used this model for 3 or more years in the past 10 years? Is there any data on that? And if there is, I mean, obviously you don't have that in front of you, but like, where could I find that? Is there a place I could look that up, or?
So what, no, probably not, because the way we are structuring it and what we are calling it is different than what the charter schools are calling it, which is where most of this is being utilized. So we do have other area schools, or not area schools, other schools within the Commonwealth that are using a similar model, but I don't know that there's any sort of data collection because they call them heads of school or different components in that capacity.
Okay. Is there a list of those schools so that we
I can
can
tell
do
you,
our own research if we wanted to? I mean, I'm just curious, because I've never heard of this, so I just want to learn more about it.
Yeah, and again, yes, I can generate a list that I can share with the school committee and the public of places where we garnered this idea from.
Okay.
Again, we tried to create something that was unique to and useful to Maynard because we are a different community. So are you going to find the exact same dynamic, the exact same structure? I don't believe that you will, but I can give
Okay.
you the list of schools we looked at.
Okay, thank you. So that was part of my second question was, where is this data that you considered prior to adopting this dual principal model so that we can get more information on how you all came to the decisions that you did? So that would be very helpful if we could get that. I guess part of a concern, I mean, if you think about just a few years ago, we went, at least at the Green Meadow, we went from 2 administrators, principal, vice principal, to 1.5, partly because of a cost savings and, there was a lot of budgetary issues going on at that time. That clearly didn't work that well, so we went from that to 2 full principals, which is a different type of a cost structure as well. So I was just kind of wondering, what were the thought processes behind some of that financially, fiscally as well? So, I mean, again, I don't know like what other districts would, how they handled that fiscal part of it.
I can't answer that, and it will likely be, people will react how they do. This model was built off of a 10-month and a 12-month principal model, so and our assistant principals prior were 12-month, or were 10-month, excuse me. I do want to say that prior to the going to the switch where we had the leadership and operations and the curriculum in both buildings and curriculum and instruction split between Fowler and Green Meadow, it was still a 1.5 administrative structure at Green Meadow. The person who was in that role was a retired administrator, and the salary was only a 0.5 in that capacity. She was amazing and did amazing work and stayed much beyond what her salary asked her to do.
I agree with that,
But in
yes.
terms of the financial structure, it was a 1.5 administrative role within that building. And so the model was built off of having 2 administrators in the building. One would be a 12-month position and one would be a 10-month position. I know the school committee has looked at a variety of districts, Sudbury being one of them, where they both have the 10 and the 12-month position for their principal and assistant principal, which is, I think, fairly typical. And there are, and I'm not up on this because it wasn't part of my research into this, but we'll talk about it in June, is the differential was minimal when it came to what we were paying compared to what Sudbury was paying, even in this year. And there's a difference in what we are paying this year versus what the model was built off of because of transitions of staff, where we had a principal in this building who transitioned out in the middle of August, at which point we needed to have someone working full-time on the schedule, so we had to change the structures in that way so that we could get the work done that we needed to over the summer. But in terms of how the model was built, it was a 10 and 12-month position.
Okay. No, thanks. That's a thorough answer. Thank you. Part of what you had referenced earlier was that one of the reasons that you were considering continuing with this model is because different roles are more specialized. For example, if you have a principal of leadership and operations versus a principal of instructional leadership. But I'm not sure that, at least personally, I don't agree necessarily that one person should be more specialized than another, and that's why you would want to do that. I mean, that's just my opinion. Partly because I'm completing my own administrative program. I'm graduating Saturday, and I've learned a lot about this. Thank you. I've learned a lot about this whole thing, and I'm actually doing the PALS tasks and all of that as we speak.
That is not easy.
So it's not easy at all. It's a lot of rigmarole. But in any case, I mean, as part of my training, I will be certified to be a principal/vice principal or assistant principal, and I have to produce proof and evidence that I can do all 4 areas. Leadership and operations, instructional leadership, supervision and evaluation, and family community engagement. Those are the things that they test you on. Those are the things you have to produce, as you know. So I just kind of wanted to put it out there that I think that anyone who takes a position in leadership, whether it's a dual principal model or not, needs to be adept in doing these things. So that's just my own personal thing I just wanted to say. And lastly, something that you said, Mary, with all due respect, 3 years, why can't we just give it a time? Why can't we give it a chance? And I'm sorry, but I disagree with that. My kids are little right now, and they're in Green Meadow, and my oldest had opportunities that they don't have right now, that I was so excited that they were going to get because specials were cut, because, there's no music concert, because there's all of this turnover in teachers, and, the teachers are trying to do the best that they can, but who's going to want to stay in a place that you don't feel that you're appreciated or valued? And so there's this huge, revolving door. I just feel very, I kind of added that as an extra thing. When you said that, it kind of triggered me to say that My kids should not be the ones to wait around.
But
So,
think of it as the possibilities. I like to think about it as we're doing the best we can for the kids, and we're really giving, you know,
I
by
totally
having
get that.
By having the culture. I mean, look at this building, for instance. The culture this year is so much better than it has been, you know, in recent
okay,
past.
no, and I totally
And to
get what
me,
you're
that's-
saying.
that's really
I get what you're
positive.
saying completely.
Yeah.
However, I think that sometimes it has to do with the person that's in the role. It's not necessarily the role itself. And I just feel that I don't think it's fair to ask kids and teachers to, you know, suck it up and think of the possibilities if we're not really clear on there's specific data, there's specific research, there's specific reasons why we really need to do this because it's going to work X, Y, and Z reasons. I feel like that was never the case presented, at least to the community. I feel like it kind of just happened all of a sudden and now we're just stuck with it and, you know, for different reasons. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm not saying I disagree with it necessarily. I'm not saying I want it to change tomorrow. But I just want that to be put out there, that, I mean, as a parent and as someone who is a career teacher and a someday administrator, I feel like there's different ways to look at this, and the most important way to look at it is what is the best thing for the kids.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily who's going to be the best evaluator or who's going to be the best operations person or who's going to do this best. It all has to come together so that the kids have the experience that they deserve.
All
So
I can tell you
that's-
is, I mean, the numerous conversations that I had with Donna Dankner when she was doing the split between the Green Meadow and the middle school, and the response that I was hearing from her, being in that role, you know, granted it was split, and unfortunately half and half, but helping the teachers to in their role too, there was more positive than not, and that trickles down to the kids. I mean, that's what we're all about. So that's why I say I just wish we could just give this a shot, because I truly believe that
Okay.
it is helping our kids, because if we can help our teachers become better teachers. I'm always saying, in education, if you stay still, you're falling behind. So anything that we can do to help our teachers be better teachers, we can all improve, that it's ultimately helping our kids. So that's
Okay,
what-
thank you for entertaining my questions.
Hi, Ann Duddy. I actually want to, you were speaking what I was going to say. I just feel at Green Meadow, we've had so many different models. So when I first started, it was principal, vice principal, ship ran, and it ran well. And then we had an interim vice principal who was a retired principal / curriculum director from Northborough, Southborough. It worked well. Then we had, and I could be getting my timelines mixed up, but then we had a full-time person come in. I think they stayed a year. Then we had another person come in who stayed a year or two. Then we had, the funding wasn't there, so we cut that position, and then we went to an interim again, part-time, who stayed a couple years. And then we went to the model of a split between two. And I just feel like Green Meadow has been kind of all over the place with administration. And I think, although it's great to have people supporting me, I actually would rather have the support for the students. And I'm looking at, special ed caseloads going into the 20s. I'm looking at speech and language teachers going into 20, 25 kids, especially these little preschoolers who have almost nonverbal issues. So, from a budgetary purpose, I always look at it my home budget. If I'm on a beer budget, I'm on a beer budget. I'm not going to Hawaii if I have to fix my roof. So I just think, looking at it from a monetary perspective also, and I know at staff meeting, we did have a session of what do we think we would like, and if it was a mixed group of us, many of us had different things. I mean, sure, some people would rather have this, other people would have this, other people would rather have another speech teacher, so it was very hard for the staff to even come up with what they would do with that money. But I just really think looking at that administrative model, I don't necessarily think one model was better than the other. I just think having a model and sticking with a model that is affordable, because yes, some people are saying 3,000, but really it couldn't just be 3,000. If you went from a part-time interim to a full-time, I think it would probably be more than 3,000. So just looking at it from even just the money perspective of it. We've had many models, so we've kind of made every model work, so.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Ann. Hi, I'm Nanda Landers. I work at Fowler, and I tried to fill out the principal survey, and I abandoned it midway because it wasn't really relevant to my job. There were lots of answers that I couldn't answer informatively. You mentioned that you worked with the Teachers Association. I would love to also work with you as the Para Association. And as a citizen and taxpayer, I'm not a citizen, as a taxpayer, I don't even have a vote. I don't think it's fair to compare Maynard with Sudbury, because I think there's a ton more students there, so they have a far bigger budget. So I wasn't sure if you were talking about a school that you were comparing to our district, or if you were talking about the town of Sudbury's budget.
And again, I wasn't involved in that analysis, so I can get better information. But I believe what the conversation was for the people who were looking at that is that, you know what, I'm not gonna extrapolate.
Probably.
But the comparison was that what we were doing, because even though Sudbury is Sudbury, what we were doing was comparative. But I wasn't involved in it. I got it secondhand, so I'm not gonna.
All right, thank you.
Because I don't want this to be, Jennifer said on Facebook. So, and yes, absolutely, we can.
I'd appreciate that, because there's a large group of paraprofessionals.
Yes, absolutely.
Would like a voice as well.
And I do want to say I appreciate your leadership in the district. We have had nothing but productive conversations with every issue, even when they've been challenging issues.
Yes.
So absolutely want to continue that
It has
relationship.
been good. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Kevin Stone again. Mary, you said something that I disagree with, so let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we were told, drink a glass of red wine at night, it's good for you. Now we're told, drinking red wine is bad for you.
Oh, that went away?
Yeah, it did.
Still good for
I thought it was back.
Still good for blood.
These
Anyway, go for
these
it.
kind of studies and research is very, very noisy. And if you try without strong statistical foundation, if you don't have a very strong, statistically significant signal, you're just chasing fads. And that's my concern, is that we're doing these research with very noisy data, and we're chasing after what is just a statistical noise fluctuation, and we're mistaking noise for signal. And when you mistake noise for signal, you wind up going all over the place. And that's just my prime concern, just listening to this right now.
I will tell you that you are likely going to be very frustrated with most educational research, because that is where we're at. But in June, I'm going to take note of what you said. I'm going to try and pull from some educational research that does exactly what you're saying, that supports that. Well, I won't say it supports or doesn't, because I haven't looked at it, but I'm going to look at some pieces, because I believe that it will be able to give you some sort of idea. But yes, educational research is very noisy, and that is why we do a lot of different things. And when teachers have been in the field and administrators in the field for a long time, they're like, oh, we did this 20 years ago, and it just went out of style. So yeah, I totally hear you.
Thank you again.
Karina Carvis. I have a student at Fowler and a student at Green Meadow. And I'm also an educator. I have an elementary ed background. And I just feel the two-principal model, like, I've always known a principal and assistant principal. And even, the surrounding towns, just talking with friends and everything. And I hear what the principal does, what the assistant principal does. I have to say, I have a fourth grader, so, she was at Green Meadow for 4 years. I got more communication those first, 3 years than I have the past 2 years. So, and that was with a principal and a vice principal. We're wasting so much money. I feel like Maynard either does like minimal, or they go way above beyond with like thinking. It's never like even keeled. It's like rash decisions, or we put way too much thought into it with this whole like two principal model. And my concern about the presentation on June 6th, if we're really talking about, you know, the two principal model, it's working great at Fowler, you know, it's working, I guess, at the high school. I don't have a high schooler, so I can't say. I haven't seen it working at Green Meadow. And so to be going through this hiring process, and we're having a very quick hiring process, and we want to hire someone for a principal where maybe it could be for a vice principal, but you're not having that data, that presentation until maybe right before we're going to be hiring someone or after the fact. That's where I'm very confused, very nervous about, where I want the support for the students, and I loved how Mrs. Duddy said she would rather it for the students. We are so top-heavy in administration here in Maynard for such a small school district. I mean, I was living in Acton, I grew up in Lexington, and there is not this much administration. I mean, those are big schools. I mean, I graduated with a class of almost 400 kids, and they're even bigger now. To have such top-heavy administration, it just doesn't seem right for our students to have that support. They're not getting that individual support in the classroom if we have other, you know, more teachers, more paras. We have, you know, if we have more administrators, they're, you know, doing stuff behind the scenes, but our kids need that. They need that one-on-one. They need to be working with them in small reading groups. These kids are our future, and I'm very concerned that they're not going to be prepared because we want, you know, all this research, and I just don't agree with it. I really question it, and it really concerns me.
Thank you, Carrie.
Ryan Sanders. I have actually a comment regarding attendance. Green Meadow has no problem. Actually, it's a little quick on the thing with, they call you and let you know that your kid's not in school instantly. Fowler doesn't call at all. My son, we never called my son in. We went away to Florida for a week. We had not one call, not one phone call that your kid hasn't come to school. But it was marked down by his home run, his teacher, that he was absent. In Tyler, it shows that he's absent, but I never got a call. So it makes me nervous that, like, what happened if he didn't go to school and I sent him to school? I would never know for a week. And I was going to be rude and call up and say, I'm going to dismiss my son just to see what would happen, but I didn't want to put everyone into a panic. Be like, where is he? Because he's supposed to be there, because I sent him. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we have to, if you guys want Green Meadow fixed with the 610, you guys have to get out and talk about it. So it's got to be around town, because I went to the senior citizen thing. They don't want it. They're going to show up in drones to vote that down. They're going to vote no on it. They're all talking. They want the fire station. They don't want to fix Green Meadow. They do not want to put the 610 towards the Green Meadow. Just to let you guys know, so we have to get out there if we want this fixed.
Thank you, Brian. That's good feedback.
Thank you, and I will email the Fowler principals right now to make sure, because absolutely that is, we want to address that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have one more question. I'm going to beat the dead horse about the two principal models. So I know the presentation is June 6th, and so the timeline that's been presented says that the final candidate will be selected by June 3rd. So are we just saying that we're going with the two principal model? Is that where, I feel like
No.
okay. So I think I'm trying to understand how through the hiring, and I think this is what some of the, maybe the repetitive questions are, is that we're trying to say, okay, if we're doing interviews May 20th, May 24th, on-site visit, final candidate May 28th, at what point, at some point, are we maybe reassessing with the data and say, okay, is it before June 6th that is being done, that before maybe the community will hear? Is there some reassessing that maybe it will work, it will not work? Or are we going to go with it?
I guess.
I'm just trying to marry the timeline to what is.
Sure. The question for me, and perhaps the school committee could take this on, is do we believe that we want to have 2 administrators in the building regardless of what their title is? And if the answer to that is yes, then we need to replace the individual who is not coming back.
Right.
If the
And I think everyone agrees
is,
with that there is definitely 2 full-time administrators. I haven't heard feedback that that's not
right.
wanted.
Okay, great. Because if the answer to that is no, and we would rather use those budget dollars to provide speech and language pathologists or teachers or paraprofessionals, then that's a whole different conversation that has not been floated to the school committee or budget subcommittee that I'm aware of. But if the answer is yes, we want 2 administrators in each building, regardless of what their title is, the timeline works to allow for that to happen, and I can't say much more than that.
Okay.
There's additional information that's coming out shortly.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So, and I think from what I've heard is that, and then my experience as a parent, is that I agree that I think 2 administrators are needed. I think even going back to when this was presented as the 10-month, the 12-month, I think lesson learned that 12-month makes sense for both. I think it's how we're defining those 2 administrators. And I'm not an educator per se, but I know Alex bring up a good point, is that could a vice principal do some of the things that we're saying that only a principal can do? So I don't know that, because I'm looking at what you're asking, is that something that could be also done so building, leadership, so building, could that be a vice principal? So these are rhetorical questions, I'm not asking you to answer on the spot, but these are questions that I know I've been asked, is that really what are the critical pieces that only a principal could do? And I think that's what a community needs to understand, is that not that, is it this or that, but what are the pieces that we are saying with this model that only a principal can attribute to?
I think what would be helpful at the June 6th meeting might be the contrast. So you're saying if we have this principal, vice principal.
New model, principal.
I've got a new thing, people. The principal.
You said it.
So you got that. And then what is the contrast with the 2 principals? And that's one of a key distinction would be
Right.
what
What
is there?
holes are we leaving if we have a principal and a vice principal versus a principal and a principal? Like, a nice visual, I guess, maybe might help to visually understand and clarify, these are the functions that cannot serve under one, that you're saying can only be served under the other, or can all the functions be served? I mean, the rest of the state seems to feel like it would work fine with both. So I think the convincing for the community is understanding why that doesn't work for Maynard in some way.
Well, I would say that as Jen pointed out, I think districts are trying to figure out how to manage there's been a continuing increase in what we need to do for education for the students, at the same time also mandates in general for the districts and
Like curriculum.
And so as that has ratcheted up since No Child Left Behind in 2001, that just continues. So
But that's changed though, right? That's okay, it's no longer No Child Left Behind, it's right, ESSE, or, right?
Yep,
Okay.
Every student succeeds at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
It's the reauthorization of the elementary and secondary education act from the 60s.
The state's changing too, so maybe that's where we're getting all this.
But in any case.
I can give a whole rundown on that.
Yeah, you could definitely probably.
You probably
But
wouldn't
in
want
any
it
case,
one
so it
year.
sounds like they're grappling with this and trying to understand how to be able to do what needs to be done and what that looks like. So I don't think that it's that other districts and school systems don't necessarily feel like they just got it figured out and it's good.
Right.
But get what you're saying. They clearly haven't moved over to this, so why not? And what is it that we're doing, and why would we do this? And what is the
Right, so I think Maynard parents want to be comforted that we're doing what's best for Maynard, and that we're not doing a pilot program for some reason to demonstrate how it could work at other schools necessarily, or the success. We need what the measuring, what is the success? And I think having the information, I'll reiterate what I said before, is defining the successes and the failures at each school, though. So I don't know if the data will be presented that way, but I think that's really helpful to know, to digest for the community to see. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. I'm Hillary Griffiths. I have like 3 small comments. One, when at the school committee meeting, I believe in March of last year, May of last year, when you guys were talking about the trouble in Fowler, and when you, like the week that you hired Dan, and I remember not knowing anything about Fowler. My takeaway at that meeting was, wait a minute, why are we assuming that since this model isn't working, that it's a quantity issue and we now need 2 principals instead of a quality issue, and maybe the individual themselves just doesn't have the skills that are needed. And I feel like that's still not being talked about at all, that, one person not doing a good job doesn't necessarily mean you need 2. And then second, I'm still concerned that the data is going to be assessed, but the person's going to be hired ahead of time. And I understand that we don't want to wait too long, but it looks like I know I would be a lot happier if we waited 3 extra days. And so I know that in town, everybody I talk to in town thinks a lot of their concerns with the school committee and the school administration is that it's like, okay, we're doing 2 principals and we're gung-ho and we're not listening to any concerns. And it seems like, listening to the concerns, assessing the data 3 days later before hiring somebody could make a big difference in terms of how the community judges the whole process. And I don't know that you're going to lose good candidates by waiting 3 days. And then I had a third comment, but I can't remember. So I really like the different educational philosophies. I like charter schools and their philosophies and trying new models. But I was looking at our school ranking, our town rankings, or I think high school rankings every year have been going down. If the majority of schools have a model that works for them, like all of the schools that are, hundreds of schools that are better than ours, test-wise, and I get tests aren't the most important thing, but all these schools that are doing better than ours, and we're struggling, and every year we're struggling more and more. I don't know that we're the best school to be saying, I know we're going to try something totally new. Maybe we want to just fix the issues that we have before trying new things.
So I can address just that last piece of it. I will give that feedback to the search committee. The timeline was sent out to be able to share with families so that we are communicating. I will give that feedback back to the search committee. It is entirely possible that we could wait 3 days for a final appointment. I'm not involved in the search committee at this point, so I'm not going to speak for them in that capacity. We are not ignoring the data, whether it's testing data or other data, that show areas that we need to improve. That is something that is key to my role and my job, is to work with principals and teachers to ensure that all of our students are able to be successful, and we have places where that's not happening. We are not unaware of that. I am not unaware of that. And we are putting things in place to be able to remediate those problems that have nothing to do with building leadership, and it has to do with curriculum alignment, and it has to do with vertical alignment, so that when a student goes from 4th grade into 5th grade, the skills follow, the assessments follow, so that we can identify where gaps are, if they are there, and how to close those. That is not something that we are unaware of or ignoring, regardless of this model. And I don't want you to feel like that this noise, to use a phrase that's come up a lot tonight, related to the principal model is in any way preventing us internally from doing that work, because that is the core of what we do, is to make sure that we get better every day so that every student can be successful. That is why I work in public education. That is why I don't work I like charter schools in some capacity, some of them, but that is why I work in a public school district, because we serve all students, and that is the mantra that we have and that we work for, whether folks feel that way currently in the community, that is what we're doing. Regardless of how many principals or leaders or teachers or paraprofessionals we have, that is what public schools do, and that is what we will continue to do. Okay?
One thing, so when you had a presentation on the MCAS scores in the fall,
Yep.
And the high school principal was talking about attendance issues being a big part of the high school score.
Yep.
And I got concerned about how we're assessing these test results and stuff, because I know he pointed out that his suggestion for improvement was for people not to go on vacation, miss school to go on vacation, and not to have people keep their kids home if they're not like really sick.
Sure.
And I didn't know at the time, but I found out that night that there's lots and lots of data about absences in schools and like throughout the whole country, and that I don't know, I'll remember all 5 of them now, but none of the 5 were kids staying home just because they didn't feel like going to school and they were pretending to be sick, and none of them were about family vacations.
Correct.
And so I was concerned that like we have data that says attendance is an issue, and instead of doing anything to address any of the 5 reasons that cause that attendance to be an issue, like I know like unidentified learning disabilities and bullying and other things, like instead of addressing any of those, we're saying people are going on vacation. And that concerned me that we're not, to me it's like all the other schools get, you know, if there's a problem with attendance, this is how you look into it and fix it. And we're like, there's a problem with attendance, this is what the rest of the country says you do to fix it, and we're gonna try this.
So I will say that I will take note of that for our presentation in the fall to make sure that we don't make glib comments. I do think that parents, I believe when Principal Karajanis was referencing that, one of the things he was speaking to were people, because he was referencing the fact that we had people who were refusing the test, keeping, in the past, we didn't the last year, keeping people home. Those things that you're talking about, the 5 ways or 5 reasons folks are out of school, particularly for some of our most vulnerable populations, are things that we are absolutely looking at and addressing. One of the things that's been talked about within the community is that Maynard needed to write a turnaround plan as a result of our subgroup performance. This is something that we have submitted to the state, and similar to the data equity walk, we are waiting for feedback on whether they will accept this plan. It addresses many of the pieces that you're discussing. Because when we dove into the data and we looked at this, we identified that the people who were not coming to school weren't the folks who were going to Florida for vacation, and that there are other issues and other reasons why these things are happening. And again, so I don't have the report in front of me, and we're waiting for the state to give us final sort of approval on that. But those are the exact conversations that I am working with my principals to make sure that they are having with their staff, so that it's not, I mean, anything from, we did the data equity walk. I'm sorry to take time, and I can stop talking if you want me to. So when we did the data equity walk, one of the pieces of data we looked at was the vocal survey, which that title means nothing to anyone except MCAS. It is a test, it is a survey that our students take at the end of MCAS in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. And they ask a variety of questions, and what the data that the state gives us shows us what all of our students said, and then it breaks it down by subgroup. And they highlight for you, so you don't even have to look at the numbers, for your subgroups, who is above your general population data for the percentage in that area and who is below that. And that survey data that we looked at, which we've looked at in the past, reflected the issues that we were seeing in the high school subgroup pieces, and it was in the 5th grade and in the 8th grade surveys. So again, not things that we are unaware of or that we are ignoring. We are not only sending letters home to parents and saying, please don't go on vacation. We are looking at our structures to figure out how we make kids, one, want to come to school so we don't have school avoidance issues, how we provide supports while they are in school so that if they are not able to function in a traditional classroom setting, that they are able to have some supports and be able to still have access to that learning and be able to do those pieces. And I could go into the realm of things in that capacity. I wouldn't be very organized thinking it right now. But what you are talking about is exactly what I want our entire team and what our entire team is attempting to look at to make sure that we are not perpetuating structural barriers to success in education. And that's a huge passion for me as a public educator, and I know for our staff as well. They desperately want our kids to be successful, and we just got to make sure that we're constantly looking at our practices to make sure we're putting things in place so they are.
It's like heartbreaking to hear if a child's staying home because they don't feel safe coming to school, for them to be told, you need to come to school because you're hurting our MCAT scores, or you need to not keep your kids home, because they have a stomach ache. Well, if they have a stomach ache because they don't feel safe, it needs to be handled in a really different way than reprimanding.
I take your feedback, and I will make sure that is not something that is, we will be more on point with our comments when we do our presentation next year. So I thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Hillary, I also just want to say, you mentioned the consideration that we had a full person, so there were then 2 full people at Fowler for that year. Up till then, there have been. We had a community forum and have been hearing in multiple ways throughout the year that there was, at that point, there was dire concern for parents who were in Fowler about the environment and behaviors, and so that wasn't just come up in that meeting that we decided.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So there was a full context within the community and conversation that led to that.
Yeah, I knew that part. I had heard a lot about the problems in Fowler, but I had also heard most of them as being like, the principal's not doing anything, the principal's not doing anything, the principal's not doing anything. And that doesn't and when I was at that meeting and I heard someone, I believe on the school committee or someone that was sitting up in front, say, it's been very clear that we can't have only one principal at Fowler. And I don't know that, if a school with 10 times the number of kids of Fowler can have one principal, I don't think our kids are like a lot more difficult than our kids at other schools. So I just didn't know that if that was even considered, and I wanted to make sure it was.
I think it was considered. I do think that there was so I agree with you that just because you add more resources to the same problem doesn't mean it's going to fix the problem. However, again, as I've mentioned multiple times, I don't believe that the community conversation about the 2-principal model is saying that we should reallocate those resources to non-administrative functions. So certainly as an administrative team in looking at the budget, and Dr. Girardi certainly has taken a great deal of heat for this over the last several years, administrative costs and how other districts function with one administrator in the building has absolutely been a topic of conversation internally, but given the community feedback and the teacher feedback, went in a different direction in that capacity.
So I mostly agree with what you're saying, and that I don't think anybody's saying we should go from 2 administrators to less than 2 administrators. But I think a lot of the comments I hear are that some of the money should be allocated elsewhere. Like, the numbers I hear about the $3,000 for the 2 principals just don't add up when people have done out the math for me. But I think that I'm hearing that we should be spending less money on administration, not necessarily have less administrators.
Okay.
But, thank you.
Hi, Amy Shu. I just have a quick question. Can you clarify if you decide to push the deadline or the hiring process those 3 days, can you just clarify what that would look like? Just because I feel like it's not quite fair to call someone in and a whole committee of people that have volunteered time to be on this committee, and then I'm just nervous that we might make a bad name for ourselves even more, to not get good people in, if we decide to do that route.
Yeah, what it looks like, again, I'm not on the search committee, and so I don't know specifically what that would push. If we are committed to 2 individuals in the building, we need to hire anyway. We need to hire for the skill set that we have advertised for. We will, of course, look for, because you don't isolate, as a team, you don't function in isolation. You need to have some degree of cross-level skills so you can support one another. So that's an area of emphasis. So I don't envision a process whereby we come together on the 6th and say, no, thank you to the individual. If, however, we would like to reconsider the 2 individuals, then I think we really need to take a whole nother look at what we're doing, if that makes sense.
Okay. So it wouldn't be, you're coming in to interview for principal of something.
Right.
And then say, well, in fact, you're actually going to be an assistant principal?
No, I don't believe that would be what would happen in any capacity.
Thank you.
Hi,
John Skogstrom. And maybe you can let me know if my math is missing something. Numbers don't always tell the whole story. But the two-principal model, well, principals, a couple of years ago, the MASC had them at an average of $110,000 a year in this state, and assistant principals at about $95,000 a year in this state. So $15,000 per school, 3 schools, $45,000 or so.
So again, it's not about the title of the principal, it's about the length of service, principal or assistant principal. The model was built off of the 10-month and the 12-month. The 10-month are the ones who are making the $90,000 to $100,000 a year, and that was how the model was defined.
I looked up the principal's salaries, and they're all at about $114,000 and above.
As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, because we had people transitioning out of the district at challenging times in the middle of the summer when we needed to get opening for the start of the school year, it was actually cheaper for us to move that individual into a 12-month role for this year rather than to pay him hourly to do that work. So and I've been very clear with this every time I've spoken with any community member or any school committee member or staff member, the model was built off of a 10 and a 12-month, which is what I have always anticipated in this process we would be going back to, which would be the case regardless of whether we call them principal and assistant principal or principal and principal. They would still be being paid that differential because it would be fewer days that they are working throughout the year.
I'm not sure I understand, but thanks.
You're going to try to put something together for June 6th that's more comprehensive?
Yeah, I can,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, I think that it seems like that would be helpful for people to frame a little bit of the conversation for how much, like the value and the considering something like that.
Lydia Clancy, I think what I hear you saying is that because of the time when someone was hired, it was done for 12 months, but going forward, you plan on their contract being renewed as a 10-month? So does that mean then that say, $114,000 salary would then be reduced or prorated because of fewer months?
So I don't want to get into individual, and because we're a small district, I don't want to get into individual contract talks, which are not part of my purview. But as we are looking to build, let's look at Green Meadow specifically. When we hire for this position, we are looking to have one person who is in for a 12-month position and one person who is in for 10-month positions, regardless of what title those people have.
Okay. All right. I think that helps clarify because I don't know that that has been specifically expressed, because before when we've asked, Dr. Girardi has said, yes, we abandoned the 10 and 12-month model. And so people are like, well, okay, everyone's working 12 months, so there's no way that this costs less than what they're saying it is. So
yeah, and what I can provide on the 6th, this is part of the conversation that I didn't want to extrapolate on because I wasn't involved. That was the discussion related to should we do a 10 and a 12-month because of the extra work that we get. But the model itself was designed to maintain the current cost structure in that capacity. I think the next layer of the conversation has come up. Do we get more return on investment by investing a few extra $1,000s to get more work out of people? And we can provide information on that piece.
okay. All right. I think that's helpful. And I think that's the sort of information that people are looking for. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, members.
Members' comments?
I've got a couple. So Mauro and I were fortunate to go to Day on the Hill for school committee at the State House last Wednesday, and it was quite educational. And the main topic of conversation was the restructuring of the foundation budget formula. So one of the gentlemen that is very much involved get his name right now, it doesn't really matter. He has been, he's integrally involved in making, the adjustment or working the new formula. He had offered to come to different school systems to actually hear from the different towns. So I reached out.
It was Jason Lewis.
Thank you, Jason Lewis. So I reached out to him and through his assistants and asked him to come to Maynard. So he'll be able to hear our specific challenges, because we do have specific challenges that bigger communities do not have, and we keep seeming to be compared as a wealthier community for some reason than we actually are. So it was a really, really good day.
Can I just,
sure.
if you're done with that,
Sure.
can I just piggyback so that?
Absolutely.
We're not doing two things?
Yep.
Let's see, so the other thing, so that part of it was really great, learning more about the foundation budget. And then after that, we went to the State House, and we dropped off letters to Kate
Governor
Hogan, Jamie Eldridge, Governor Baker, and we also gave
Devin Sheehan, who's
letter.
the head of the Massachusetts School Committee.
So we dropped off letters to them about our school district's issues that we have, and, possible ways that the foundation budget could maybe be helped, I think, so that they know. Jamie Eldridge and Kate Hogan already heard that when they came, but we just wanted to reiterate since we were there. So we dropped off letters to them, and then after that, we went to a luncheon, which was fantastic, and the luncheon was put on by a number of different vocational schools in the state, one being Assabet, which was fantastic, and the head chef of Assabet put the whole thing together. So it was...
The entire State House was there that day.
Yes, and it was really good food. So, go ahead.
So let's see. I also wanted to brag about one of our last 2018 alumni, Garvey Cummings, who received a 4-year scholarship to the University of Virginia. And I just saw a post last night of a video that the University of Virginia did to talk about what a great university is in that, and she was actually in it. It was pretty darn cool. So again, so many of we just are so proud of all of our students, and this is just one more example of our little town and how it, goes out into the world. I think that was it. I think we talked about everything else, so that's it.
So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is, I just wanted to speak to, we just had an election, clearly, and I just wanted to say that every election is an opportunity. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you to all the candidates who were deeply committed and for their passion for our community. While this race, sometimes it ended up feeling divisive despite everyone's absolute best intentions. It also highlighted the deep caring that we all share for this community, and it brought out some excellent questions and discussion that highlight what is most important right now throughout the district for us to be talking about and looking at. And now we get a sort of reset to move forward as a community and continue with those things. And I would like to say congratulations, and I was going to say welcome to Lydia, but you're here now and not quite here yet. And soon, Natasha. And thank you for what you did tomorrow and for what you're going to continue to do. And we're not done. Like, we're all still here and caring for this district and the community. I truly look forward to working with each of you and the fresh perspective that you'll bring to the board as the newest elected representatives of the community. And I look forward to the rest of your time here and what we have from you after. And for everyone, we appreciate everything that you bring in participating and caring in this community. So I wanted to say that. And then I was involved in the data equity walk, and I loved geeking out over that data. It was just, it was really fascinating. I would highly recommend, I know it's like a Saturday morning, but it's just really excellent. I mean, I don't know how it seems like you felt like it was useful too from your perspective, but it highlighted, there were some things, in fact, there's one of the surveys is part of the MCAS, and what is it? Every grade that takes the MCAS that they have that survey, or is
No.
it just certain grades?
5th, 8th, and 10th.
I knew 5th. Okay, and then I was thinking, I don't think it was all of them, but there were some things where Maynard actually really excelled. Like we were above, and in a number of the questions. And it was just, and then you can also see trends where where it really helps us to see the places where we need to pay attention and focus. And to see some of that showing up in the academic side and seeing some of those trends and it was really more of a like, what are our questions? Where do we think we go from here? What do we think is going on? And engaging in those conversations, looking at everything together on both from the social emotional side and the environment and what it's like from that side and also from the academic side. So, and seeing possibilities for how that data gets married.
How was the turnout, by the way?
It really was not high.
One of the pieces, so it was a Saturday morning, it's a tough time of year, there are a variety of reasons why that happened that I won't go into. But one of the pieces that we are very much looking for, and we got some feedback from families, so thank you to parents who emailed in response, not only took the survey, but also emailed specifically about the survey and about the structure, and really looking for some ways that we can improve to make sure that we can have different turnout, better turnout. I do like, and it was intentionally placed on a Saturday because it's a lot of data, and to do that, rushing home from work with dinner and all those pieces, I've participated in these kinds of events on a Saturday, and it just, as much as we still have sports and other things, and thank you very much for allowing Mr. Waldron to come, even despite the very busy weekend. I hope he gave you the gift bag. He said he would.
Did he give you the gift bag? All right.
Yeah. I have more we can share. I know it's a very busy time. Weekends are also challenging as well, but it's just a different atmosphere. So I thought the conversations were incredibly productive. The feedback was great in terms of how we can move forward. As I mentioned to a couple groups, this was our first iteration. So I was nervous about sort of how it would go. But one of the things that I walked away from is that I would like to do this with our staff. I would like to do this with our students, and there's models for that as well, and really just dive in. And so the leadership team and I are working on sort of some next steps for us as a district. But I do want this to become an annual part of our school community.
Yeah,
I'm glad you enjoyed. I enjoyed looking at the data too.
The other thing was it just helps you to see here's my experience or where we are, but here we all are together. So it also helps to understand the community a bit more. It was very enlightening for me as a community member and obviously as a school committee member.
Is there anything that's going to be sent out for those of us who couldn't make it on a Saturday morning?
So,
Yeah, right.
I may have mentioned this in the beginning. We have submitted our report to the state. We are waiting for feedback on that for any changes they would like us to make or additional components. And then once that is done, we'll share that out with the school community. Yep.
Good question. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to say is with the recent shooting that happened, which is awful, I just wanted to see if maybe in a future, like not too distant future meeting, we could just get an update maybe from the safety committee, just understand what's going on and what the goals might be, just see where things are at and see what's happening in the, yeah.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. Yeah, and since you're the vice chair, I'm asking, okay?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Let me make that note.
And I think that's it for today.
You have anything, Laura? Yes. Let's see. So I just wanted to, I didn't know that we were going to end up having the handout for everybody to see about the principal search, so I was going to just mention that. But I did want to just remind people that if you have not already filled out the survey that they sent out, it would be really helpful for them to, if you could do that. And if you don't have the survey link, please email me and I can send that to you.
Can we send that out again? That's what I'm wondering if we could do that just one
Yeah.
more time for anyone that doesn't have it at their fingertip and is a, yeah.
Sorry. No, that's okay. No, that's good. Let's see. A couple other takeaways from the Mass Day on the Hill that I got was the NSBA, which is the federal level of funding, that we should also be talking to them about the type of funding or the amount of funding that the nation is, that we're getting federal funding for state, that we should be contacting them about that also. And then the other thing is the 2020 census is coming up. And one of the things that we need to do as a town is making sure that we fill that out, because that information goes to the state and federally too, and so that helps them figure out how much money we get. So that is coming up next year, I think, so 2020. And then the last thing from that was how foster kids are, trying to blank.
Not allocated, but how they're counted, how they...
Right,
Yeah.
how foster kids are allocated money, and how we pay for that, for them, for schooling and anything else that they have. And also, I was just wondering, how many foster kids do we have in the system, and, what kind of services do we have for them, and how does that work? Like, are the foster kids live here and go here, or do some foster kids live in other districts, and then there's transportation costs and things like that? So those were just some of the things. And one of the things that some of the senators are working on is a digital backpack program, so that their information, school-wise, is just taken with them, no matter what school system they're in, because from what I understood, that's not happening.
Yeah, we can provide an update on these pieces. It's an incredibly challenging, as people could probably understand, and the system is, in theory, designed to be the least disruptive for the student, given that they're experiencing very turbulent situations in the other aspects of their life. And so it can be anything from they reside in our district with the family and they attend school with us, or it could be that they are placed, their foster placement is in a different district, but they still attend our school. We can find information on those components and the services and those types of things. I do know that they did change the law recently, or regulation, I don't think it was a law, that essentially we don't wait for information that the student should start right away regardless of not having paperwork, but that it would be, I hadn't heard of that, that's a great structure, so that way we can get the immunizations and all of the things that we need. But I do know that the intention is that, the student will start right away regardless of having the paperwork, which is very different from other new students coming into the district. So we can follow up on that.
Okay, great. I can maybe give you a little bit more information about that. Let's see. I think that's all I have. So.
I have one more piece.
Oh, one more, okay.
If I could, I had spoken to the principal up at the high school, Chuck Garrett Janis, and had mentioned to him that, we've had sort of a roundtable at Green Meadow for Green Meadow staff and students, and also at the Fowler, but that I wanted to have a similar type of thing up at the high school. So he is trying to figure out how to do it. He talked about having a separate one for the staff so they can feel comfortable talking, and then having a separate one for parents up at the high school too, because I feel like we need to pay them maybe more attention than we have been.
Recently?
We've been a little distracted. So he thought it was a great idea, so I'm just waiting for him to come back to me with, he said as far as the staff's concerned, we probably want to work it into one of the regular staff meetings, and he would love to have more parents, because he said with the PTA meetings, there's 4 or 5 parents that show up. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. That'd be great to have that happen. I'm glad you asked him about that.
Yeah.
So I guess now I'm a little unsure what's happening with the executive session because
we're
of
not doing
it.
what Lydia is.
That is up to
So
the committee to determine.
we decide that we can vote to hold that.
But she was saying that there are certain ones that we have to deal with tonight.
No.
No.
No, not tonight. My only question would be whether we can wait until next Thursday, or if we would need to do something on Monday or Tuesday.
So we have to know by the end of business tomorrow if it needs to be like Tuesday at the earliest.
Let me look,
Is that
right.
48 hours?
Yeah, can I look right now?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
I gotta
So
do
we have
some
a
math.
plan. That's okay.
Math on the spot.
I don't even know what my schedule looks like.
Someone tell some jokes or something.
I can sing for you while we wait.
Can I say something really quick?
Sure.
So the regulation or whatever regarding foster children, the law is actually for homeless children. So homeless children are also allowed to register
Yes.
without all the documentation. That by default sort of applies to foster children in the way it's written, because it says like temporary housing. And so when kids are first put in foster care, they fall under that. But the practice is changing starting going into September, in that they're supposed to evaluate what the best interest of the child in terms of where they go to school, and that's a new change. So where before it was like whether or not the kid fell under the McKinney-Veto, McKinney-Veto, yeah. Now there's another layer where it's a state law, I don't remember if it's state or federal, but in order to try to make level the playing field for foster children, their best interest is supposed to be weighed a lot more heavily, yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. That was my misunderstanding.
Did they mention that? Because I'm wondering if they know.
I don't recall hearing
Share that
that.
information
we
from
did not
the
hear that.
training.
No, they probably do it.
Yeah.
And I think quite likely and at least because my analysis was exactly that piece, because even if it's temporary housing status, that would be how I would have analyzed it, but perhaps other districts were not doing it that way. And so being very explicit about the regulation would allow for, to make sure that everyone has to analyze it in that capacity. So thank you for that
I'm also
information.
not sure if everybody who takes in the paperwork at Maynard knows about that law.
Okay.
My interaction was several years ago, so they could be more aware now. But at the time, they didn't seem to know that you didn't need all of the documentation to register a child.
Okay. We will follow up and make sure. Absolutely. Gotta do some math here. Hold on.
Just real quick, since there's people listening, or will be listening eventually, I know we're talking about the 610, and Brian brought up the very good point that there could be some opposition out in the community. The one thing that I would like to remind everybody who does eventually listen to this is that the funding source that is being considered by the people are considering whether or not to support it.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
I think that needs to be in the presentation.
Either way, we could do next Thursday. We can do next
We
Thursday.
can do next
Yep.
Thursday?
Okay.
All right, great.
So
So we can just
Do an executive session next
So
Thursday.
I would probably have a motion to table executive session for tonight, and
Okay.
presuming positive outcome from that vote, move forward that way.
I'm not going to be here, so maybe someone else should make the motion. You want to make the motion?
But then do we even?
We'll have a quorum because Lydia will be on at that point.
I hope. Would you rather reschedule for when you can be there?
I'm all right if we have a quorum with not being able to be there, that's okay.
Okay.
I just, particularly if it's timely, there's some of this stuff, there's
Time sensitive.
Yeah, they're time sensitive for other reasons.
Yeah, do we know if Dawn is available?
So what you might want to do is to table with a potential meeting next Thursday. I don't know that you need to include the date of the meeting in the motion.
So I'm
and then
gonna
we
say-
can establish that and publicize it.
Because I don't know if you wanted to attend the Green Meadow Future Committee meeting too, and we don't want it to, conflict with that.
Looking at the district calendar for Wednesday, I would prefer, who am I, but I would prefer that we do this next week rather than wait until the week after.
Oh, no, I'm saying,
Yeah.
but we could do maybe
Right.
Wednesday
night.
next week, or,
Oh, and that's the other piece, it doesn't need, so we could figure something out at a different time. So why don't we do this? Why don't you have the motion to table?
Yep.
And then we can communicate and schedule that at a time that's convenient for folks to be able to make it.
Okay. So I make a motion to table the executive session for MG Chapter 30A, Section 21-2, until a later date after Lydia has been sworn in, and we would like to do that in a timely manner, so that would be, we're looking to propose by next Thursday to be able to do that.
I'll second it.
And any discussion?
Just to say, I'm going to be away from the 14th to the 21st, so I do think you should do it without me.
I'm just asking
Okay.
her now what her schedule looks like. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. I said it.
3-0.
Raise my hand.
thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm glad you came up with that idea.
Sorry it didn't work out for you tonight.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
So I'm going to, we're done?
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Yes, second it.
All in favor? Thank you.
There you go. Good job.
Thank you, everybody.